We're now to the coronavirus pandemic and a grim global milestone passed today. Johns Hopkins University reports the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases worldwide has topped 150 million. Nearly 19 million of those cases are in India, which has broken daily global records for new cases almost every day this week. Another 386,000 today and nearly 3,500 more deaths. As we've mentioned all this week, health experts believe the actual number of sick and dead is far higher than reported figures. This is what it looks like in a neighborhood in Delhi today. A long line of people waiting to get oxygen for their stricken loved ones. Hospitals and makeshift medical centers are getting overrun with patients, many to be turned away. The head of COVID intensive care in New Delhi, talking to CNN earlier, saying what she is seeing there is nothing short of an apocalypse. Well, our chief international correspondent Clarissa Ward is in New Delhi, India's hardest hit city. She witnessed the fear, the anger, the heartbreak that so many are feeling right now, and we need to warn you, some of the images in her report are difficult to watch.
In Delhi now, you're never far from heartbreak. Almost everyone in this city has been visited by grief. At the Seema Puri crematorium, the loss weighs heavily in the smoldering air, and the dead are piling up.
There are bodies literally everywhere you turn here. I've honestly never seen anything quite like it. And the organizers say that pre-COVID, they might cremate 7 or 8 people a day. Today alone, they've already cremated 55 bodies, and it's not even lunchtime.
Just months ago, India's leadership boasted that the country had effectively defeated COVID. Now it has set global records for new cases as a terrifying second wave ravages the country. Jitender Singh Shunti says he and his men don't even stop to take breaks. And still, they can barely cope with the flow. A volunteer approaches. They've run out of tables for the bodies, he says. Then adds that his mother died from COVID the night before.
You must be tired.
Very. But the time is not for the rest.
Do you believe the government figures, the death tolls, the COVID figures that they're giving, or do you think the real figures are much higher?
The numbers that you're seeing on television are the numbers of people who are dying in hospitals, he says. They're not factoring in the people who died at home in isolation. If those numbers are added, the actual number will go up by 3 times. To keep up with those mounting numbers, the crematorium has been forced to expand, creating an overflow area in a neighboring car park. Shyam Sharma is saying goodbye to his 45-year-old younger brother.
Last night, I was thinking that his health is improving, but suddenly the phone of doctor came on my mobile phone that your brother has expired.
Do you think his death could have been prevented?
Yes, I think we can save him with a better health hospital.
India's healthcare system is at a breaking point. Unable to cope with the scale of the crisis, its people left to fend for themselves. This crowd has been waiting for 6 hours for the chance to get some oxygen. They can't rely on the state.
Who do you need oxygen for?
My mother.
Your mother? How old is she?
47.
And is her oxygen very low?
She is in very critical condition.
58%. 58%, right. And we are trying since morning. We are not getting the oxygen anywhere.
How many places have you been to?
19.
19?
Since morning, since 6 a.m.
Have you tried taking her to the hospital?
There are no beds.
There are no beds.
Before 4 days, we have tried so much, but we didn't get any beds.
Priya Shrivastava was lucky enough to find her mother a place in a hospital, only to find out there was no oxygen.
Around 10 deaths I have seen in front of my eyes. should I do? And I'm so scared what's gonna happen with my mom.
Are you angry?
I'm so angry because of this organization. Our government is so careless. They even don't care about what public is suffering. They don't know from which thing we are suffering. There are so many people who are standing over it and fighting for this thing.
Her mother is now in critical condition. Like many here, she feels completely overwhelmed. For those who can't source their own oxygen, this is the only option. A drive-in oxygen center by the side of the road. A woman arrives unconscious in a rickshaw. Several hospitals have already turned her away. They simply didn't have the beds. Now she is relying on the kindness of strangers. Her sons work desperately to try to revive her.
This isn't a hospital or even a clinic. It's a Sikh temple. But for these people who've already been turned away from so many hospitals, this is their last chance at survival.
The leader of the Sikh charity that runs this facility says it gets no support at all from the government. He says he already had COVID twice. But he and his volunteers continue to work 24 hours a day.
We want to save their lives. This is our heart's voice.
It must hurt your heart to see the way your people are suffering.
Yes, madam. Many times we cry also. What is going on?
It is impossible to escape the tragedy of this vicious second wave. Coronavirus is ravaging the old, but it has not spared India's young. The Prime Minister has announced that everyone over the age of 18 can get the vaccine. But with less than 2% of the country inoculated, that offers only a distant hope. So India's capital continues to burn, suffocated by the rampant spread of this deadly virus. A city and a country brought to its knees, praying for respite.
And Clarissa Ward joins me now from New Delhi. And Clarissa, they're queues for oxygen, for treatment, for beds, even queues for bodies to be cremated. It all seems so overwhelming.
I think overwhelming is exactly the word to describe it, Lynda. I mean, I don't know if you can see the sun has come down. There's a very long line of people just behind me. It snakes all the way around the block. Some of these people have been waiting here since 5 in the morning. Some of them say they even came last night. And they're waiting for oxygen. It's not something that you or I would ever think to have to line up for, to wait for. But here in India now, in the midst of this tragedy and this crisis, oxygen has become a precious commodity. Many hospitals simply don't have enough to give to their patients. And that's why people are forced to come here day in, day out, and get in this line, carrying these heavy cylinders, desperately hoping to fill them with oxygen so that they can give it to their parents, their family members, their grandchildren, whoever it might be in their family who is suffering from this horrendous second wave. And while they're waiting patiently for their turn to get this life-saving gas, there is a growing sense here, Lynda, of very real frustration, particularly with the government. There's a sense that a lot of this could have been avoided, and certainly that it could have been better prepared for. Lynda?
Yeah, it certainly seems, Clarissa, that this second wave caught them completely by surprise. As you say, there is this desperate need for oxygen. What else do they desperately need? What sort of international aid is now arriving?
So, I mean, the world is really pulling together here and trying to stand in solidarity with India. There is a raising awareness, I think, globally that, you know, until everyone is protected or vaccinated, no one in the world is actually safe from coronavirus. So people have been donating a lot of vaccines, a lot of oxygen, remdesivir. But there is a sense here on the ground at the same time, while that is appreciated, that it's not enough. This is a healthcare system that is essentially on the brink of collapse. So there need to be very fundamental systemic changes put in place. There need to be huge amounts of money and infrastructure funneled into changing the current situation and making sure that a third wave doesn't come down the line. And what's sort of staggering to get your head around, Lynda, is that we're not even at the peak yet of this second wave. Scientists are saying it could be another 2 or 3 weeks. How long can these people come out day in, day out and wait for hours on end for oxygen? This is not a sustainable situation. And unless the government is able to get control over it, many, many more people are going to die, Lynda.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks is a very long time to wait in such a critical situation. I want to ask a little bit more about the vaccine rollout, because we know that India is the largest producer of vaccines in the world, yet such a small percentage of the population have been vaccinated. Give us a sense of how that campaign is rolling out.
So just yesterday, the Prime Minister said that everyone over the age of 18 as of tomorrow, May 1st, should be able to get vaccinated. But already several states have come forward and said, we're not ready for that. We can't cope with that. We don't have all the materials in place. You know, you touched on something important earlier, Lynda, which was that the government here was almost doing a victory lap a few months ago. They thought that they had gotten through the worst of COVID, and they were actually giving away the materials for vaccines in some cases to the international community, trying to play their part because they thought that they had escaped the worst of it. Now it's a much more complicated picture. Keep in mind, this is an enormous country, 1.4 billion people. A lot of them right now don't want to go out on the streets and get in a long line like this one, even if it's that they're waiting for vaccines. Sorry, there's a slightly chaotic situation here because people are coming and going all the time trying to get their oxygen. So a lot of people don't want to go out and get in a line like this where there is no social distancing, even if it means they can get a vaccine. And in some of those states, as I said, they're just not ready for that kind of demand, for those kinds of numbers. So it is still very much a chaotic situation here, despite whatever vows the government may be making.
Yeah, absolutely. Clarissa Ward, our thanks to you and the team there in New Delhi. Stay safe. We will speak to you again soon. Thank you. Well, to give you some perspective, not all of India is experiencing this second wave with equal severity. The National Capital Territory of Delhi is by far the worst affected populous area, and states in southern and western India are seeing higher case levels on a per capita basis than states in the east. And as you just heard from Clarissa, starting tomorrow, everyone in India aged 18 or older is eligible to get vaccinated. But some states say they don't have enough supply and will have to delay the expanded rollout. CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta expects this already terrible crisis to get even worse in the weeks ahead.
You have a 20 to 25% positivity rate, more than 300,000 people being officially diagnosed, which suggests that the numbers of newly infected people every day could be over 1 million if you do the math on that. And we know that the number of people who are diagnosed a few weeks after that is when you see the real surge in hospitalizations, and then a few weeks after that, the surge in deaths. So the hospitalizations are what they are now. I mean, what are the next 4 to 6 weeks going to look like? This gets a lot worse.